Today is the unveiling of my daughter's new home. Juana said to me very seriously, "Mom, come no matter what happens." Despite my concerns, I intend to wholeheartedly celebrate her new home today. However, when I arrived late, I was completely ignored by my husband, Pablo, and my mother-in-law. I expected it from my mother-in-law, but never thought Pablo would do the same. Feeling uncomfortable, I pretended to take a walk in the garden and went outside, where my granddaughter, Dorothy, found me and ran up to me with a smile. "Grandma, listen." Dorothy hesitated as if she wanted to say something, but when I nodded, she gathered her courage and began to speak. It was shocking news. The reason why Pablo and my mother-in-law were ignoring me became clear, and I left the scene in silence. Afterwards, I received repeated angry calls from Pablo. Normally calm, Pablo was shouting angrily. When Pablo demanded, "What are you thinking?" I responded, "Let's end what has been going on for 30 years. My carefully planned story of revenge is about to begin. My name is Brenda Morris. I am 51 years old and have worked in the same place for 30 years after graduating from a junior college. There was a time when I dreamed of becoming a housewife, but it never came true. 30 years ago, when I was 20, a marriage proposal came from a customer at the steak bar my family ran. I knew his family very well. They were like a typical upper-class family and stood out in our local countryside. I started working in local shops since middle school and have always looked up to them. The wife was tall and beautiful like a model, and the husband was talented and worked in a large company. Their son, inheriting good traits and well-bred, was worth seeing, and they chose me as his bride. I was just an ordinary office worker fresh out of junior college, and I could hardly believe such an offer at first. Later, when I was invited to their home and confirmed that the story was true, it felt like a dream. "I have always been concerned about you, Ms. Brenda, who works hard and cheerfully," said the person I respected, making me feel that my work at the store was rewarded. When we were alone, Pablo told me he wanted to build a stable home with a modest and calm woman, unlike his flashy mother. Pablo, 10 years my senior, was a supervisor at a company run by his father's brother, his uncle. I felt that he was refreshing, kind, and beyond perfect. Having only experienced Dutch treat dates with men my age, I was captivated by Pablo's sophisticated escorting. "Ms. Brenda, please join our family without any worries." Encouraged by his mother's words, I married with the expectation of joining their charming family. However, that dream was abruptly shattered. 3 months into our marriage, after the marriage registration was submitted, it happened. His mother said, "We have decided to welcome my mother into our home because she needs care." "Brenda, I heard you have a caregiver qualification." "What I have is a caregiving administration qualification." What? It wasn't clear how it came about, but it seemed that my mother-in-law misunderstood that I had a direct caregiver qualification. I intuitively felt that they were expecting me to be a caregiving staff. I thought it was strange. For someone ordinary like me, without any special talents, the role expected was too significant. The face of my mother-in-law, who used to be kind, now looked tense. Perhaps this might have been a reason to drive me out of the house. An uncomfortable silence spread between me and my mother-in-law. It was Pablo who broke the tension. "Mom, I didn't marry Brenda for that reason. The issue with Grandma is our problem. What would we do if Brenda were to leave? But I may not have the qualification, but I'll cooperate wherever I can help." Pablo's defense of me truly made me happy. Inspired by his reflexive words, I resolved to try even harder as a daughter-in-law. Back at my parents' home, my grandmother was suffering from dementia. My mother was taking care of her, and I sometimes helped too, but somehow I missed the timing to talk about it. My father-in-law was the third son in his family, and if I remember correctly, his grandmother lived with the eldest son's family. I think that fact was one reason I couldn't speak up. Gaining practical knowledge might have been useful, but the necessity for it vanished quickly, because not long after, my father-in-law passed away. Seeing my mother-in-law crumble into tears, saying, "How am I supposed to live without you?" was pitiable. My father-in-law was still in his 50s and facing the sudden death of a loved one. My mother-in-law cried incessantly during the wake, and there were no comforting words to be found, but Pablo was there to support and comfort her. While I was busy attending to the visitors who came to mourn, I overheard a shocking conversation among my father-in-law's relatives. My mother-in-law's once wealthy family had fled to this area from New York, burdened with a large debt. The continuous work and demands for money had shortened my father-in-law's life, according to those around him. The forceful suggestion by my mother-in-law to take in and care for her own mother seemed, perhaps, driven by a desire for the inheritance. Now that my father-in-law had passed away, I also heard that disownment from the family was seriously being considered. After receiving a disownment declaration from my father-in-law's relatives, Pablo was also fired from the company run by his uncle. Moreover, there was a heavy mortgage on this new house owned by Pablo, taken out to welcome me. It also came to light that my mother-in-law had unilaterally canceled and spent his life insurance. This house was originally supported by my father-in-law, and after his death, my mother-in-law's statement, "How am I supposed to live without you?" was literal. Because of my mother-in-law's spending, there were no savings left, and amid this unstable situation, she said, "From now on, please put all of your salary into the house, Brenda." She insisted on using my father-in-law's survivor's pension for retirement funds, but it's doubtful whether that was actually feasible. Pablo said he would look for a new job, but no specific time had been mentioned. At 20 years old, I found myself bearing the pressure of supporting this home's mortgage and the family's livelihood. And amidst all this, I realized I was pregnant. I continued to work until just before giving birth and named my daughter Juana. Life was tough, but Juana had become my hope to live for, and I vowed to protect her no matter what. Pablo found a new job, but the salary was low, and even combined with my maternity benefits, we barely made ends meet. In this situation, my mother-in-law continued to live luxuriously, and despite Pablo's repeated admonishments, there was no sign of her willing to work. Despite Juana still being small, my mother-in-law enjoyed going out and was pleased when people said, "You don't look like a grandmother at all. It's hard to believe you have a granddaughter." Most of Juana's care fell on me as my mother-in-law treated her as her own, and she was rushing me to return to work. As I questioned myself, who am I really? Pablo said, "This is temporary. Once things settle down, let's start a new life, just the three of us." His words gave me strength, and I began to dream of a life without my mother-in-law. Since Pablo's company was nearby, I could rush there if anything happened, so under this condition, I left Juana with my mother-in-law and returned to work. I was committed to achieving our goals by doing overtime and jobs with allowances. Yet our savings did not grow, and there was no sign of our lives getting easier. My mother-in-law often took Juana out, bought expensive children's clothing, and said, "This is for Juana," asking me to pay for it. Moreover, she secretly used the family credit card Pablo created, making the problem even more serious. I planned to pay it off before it affects Pablo's credit. In this difficult situation, Pablo lost his job. The need to frequently respond to his mother's calls, causing him to miss work, was the reason. Yet, my mother-in-law's spending habits showed no signs of improvement. "I've told you many times, we can't afford this anymore," but she always replied, "Don't worry, money comes around." As the daughter of a former wealthy family and having married my father-in-law for his looks, she never knew financial struggles while he was alive. Even now, she was the only one free from financial hardships. Pablo, who was sensible about money, tried to make his mother accept reality, but often felt resigned. Combined with the guilt he felt towards me, I understand why Pablo wanted to leave the house. Ultimately, we decided to save up as soon as possible and move out. Pablo's salary remained low, but he enjoyed a relatively free career in sales, and Juana was growing up healthy. However, Juana was completely drawn to her grandmother, and my mother-in-law doted on her greatly, saying she resembled her. She bought expensive children's clothing, took Juana out, and then asked Pablo to cover the costs. Considering the house mortgage and Juana's future education expenses, I have been limiting our spending. As a result, Juana seems to have grown even closer to her grandmother. I often questioned if this is really the right approach. Juana had become very close to her grandmother, and I started to doubt our dream of starting a new life together as a trio. As she became a middle school student, Juana began to prioritize spending time with friends and distanced herself a bit from her grandmother. Still, her love for her grandmother hadn't changed. Over time, however, the gifts from her grandmother became less frequent. Juana matured wisely, understanding that having different things at school could make her stand out. Our conversations increased as she started talking to me about her preferred schools. The plan to move out as a family naturally dissipated, but our situation improved from before. Juana decided to attend a university in New York and start living on her own. During a moment when I felt overwhelmed by loneliness, Juana said to me, "Mom, we're here because you worked so hard. I love Dad and Grandma too. I'm happy to be part of this family." Hearing Juana acknowledge my efforts nearly brought me to tears. I believe we are a united family, maintained through our good relationships, especially for Juana's sake. Despite ongoing financial demands and wasteful spending by my mother-in-law, Pablo has always stood by my side, supporting me. Without Pablo's support, I couldn't have made it this far. My hope now was to enjoy a quiet life with Pablo now that the mortgage was paid off. 3 years after Juana started working, she announced her marriage and pregnancy, bringing joy to both of us. Then, when Juana's child was born, I finally became a grandmother. The baby was named Dorothy. Juana's husband was a local, and they married due to that connection. They planned to return to this area and build a house. Juana's family visited often now, and I finally got to spend time with my granddaughter, who looked just like Juana. I've become so fond of my adorable granddaughter, and I can now somewhat understand what my mother-in-law felt. However, I was still concerned about my mother-in-law becoming overly attached to her great-granddaughter. Recently, my mother-in-law stopped talking about money. Curious, I asked Pablo about it, and it turned out he had been secretly selling her abundant collection of branded goods and jewelry. He was giving the proceeds to her. He said, "She has so much that she won't notice, but she did notice and suspected me whenever she pointed out something missing." In the midst of these recurring issues, while Pablo scolded her, he also soothed her. "That design is too childish. I'll buy you new ones," he'd say, and she, unaware, was pleased. However, for Pablo, continuing to sell her possessions was not a sustainable option. Then, my mother-in-law began asking me for financial support again. One day, she insisted she needed money so persistently that I, exhausted, finally yelled out, "Stop it! Have you ever thought about why this is happening?" Surprised by my reaction, my mother-in-law turned sullen and went back to her room. Pablo immediately followed her. He was likely soothing her again. Regretting my outburst, I went to apologize to her and overheard a conversation between Pablo and my mother-in-law. "We need to handle this more skillfully. Leave it to me, there won't be any problems. She's the type who'll comply easily if treated gently. I've been controlling her like this for the past 30 years. But Brenda is refusing to pay the mortgage. The mortgage will be done soon, and then I'll transfer the property back to my name. She listens to me, so don't worry. If you want, I don't mind driving her out. After all, she's just here to provide money." Pablo's voice was full of confidence. I carefully made my way downstairs without making a sound. I felt as though I had received a heavy blow. The true adversary I had to confront was not my mother-in-law, but Pablo. The days I had spent enduring and trusting Pablo now seemed futile. I could only mock myself for being foolish. Despite the pain, I considered divorce, but I couldn't just remain silent. I decided to plan a revenge that would make Pablo deeply regret his actions. The next day, I pretended everything was normal while I began to craft a detailed plan for revenge. Then, the special day arrived when Juana's new house was completed, and we were invited to the housewarming party. Juana had said to me very seriously, "Mom, come no matter what happens." Despite my concerns, I intended to wholeheartedly celebrate her new home today. However, when I arrived late, I was completely ignored by my husband, Pablo, and my mother-in-law. I hadn't expected to be ignored by Pablo. Feeling uneasy, I pretended to take a walk in the garden and went outside, where my granddaughter, Dorothy, found me and ran up to me with a smile. I was warmed to know she remembered me, and I squatted down to her height. "Dorothy, you've grown so much. Grandma has been looking forward to seeing you." "Grandma, listen." Dorothy hesitated as if she wanted to say something, but when I nodded, she gathered her courage and began to speak. It was shocking. The reason why Pablo and my mother-in-law were ignoring me became clear, and I silently left the scene. Afterwards, I received repeated angry calls from my husband, but I ignored them and quickly headed home. While I felt bad for Juana, the celebration was probably in chaos. Finally responding to the persistent calls, the normally calm Pablo was trembling with anger. When Pablo demanded, "What are you thinking?" I recalled the fact that Dorothy had just told me. "Hey, can you give Grandpa money for the hospital?" Dorothy had referred to Pablo when she said that. I didn't understand what the hospital fees referred to. Trying to get more details from Dorothy, I asked, "Were you talking to Grandpa? Can you tell me about that conversation?" "Grandpa is very sick, and he can't get treatment because Grandma won't give the money. Mom and Dad said they can't give any more money either, so Grandma, please help," Dorothy said. Her words revealed that Pablo had been pretending to be ill, making the family believe that I was the one reluctant to provide medical funds. Juana probably chose this day, when the family was gathered, to create an opportunity to discuss the truth. I think that's why she insisted so strongly that I come. There had also been an incident where I had announced the end of my financial support before I arrived, which must have contributed to the tense atmosphere at the venue. Facing an enraged Pablo, I said, "I had no idea you were so ill." He seemed surprised. He seemed desperate to figure out how his deception had been exposed. "Aren't you ashamed to demand money by faking your own illness?" I pressed him. That was Mother wanted. He began to make excuses, but I cut him off. "No, your mother is always honest about her needs." Typically, my mother-in-law doesn't resort to complicated schemes. If she needs something, she directly asks for money. Is your mother also being deceived by you? It's possible that my mother-in-law was also misled by Pablo's falsehoods. Perhaps her persistent demands for money had a background like this. This explanation would make sense. My mother-in-law has been traumatized by the bankruptcy of her family's business in the past and the forced move from a luxurious home. Therefore, if I say I will not pay the mortgage, she would not pursue it further. Yet, on that day, my mother-in-law was unusually persistent. What's wrong? You're not like the usual Brenda. Normally, I'm not the type to make such statements. I'm a compliant wife who agrees to everything. It was clear he was trying to sway me as he attempted to steer the conversation. What is this divorce petition about? I don't understand why, Pablo said. Let's end what has been going on for 30 years, Brenda replied. Juana had handed the divorce petition Pablo had requested beforehand. After hearing this fact from Dorothy, I decided to go home immediately. I prepared to leave, packing my things, though I actually had very little to take. In reality, the main purpose was to quickly take the deed to the house. At that moment, Juana came chasing after me. "Mom, is something wrong?" "You said you were going to look at the garden and haven't come back," she asked. "I'll explain later, but please give this to Dad," I answered. "Is this a divorce petition?" she exclaimed in surprise. "I'm sorry, but I planned to wait until today's celebration was over and then give this document to your father. Don't worry, your father is healthy. His recent health checkup showed no problems," I explained. Juana seemed wise and understanding of the situation. Pablo, having received the divorce petition, contacted me in a panic. "Let's talk," at least he said. "Fine, but a lawyer will also be present during the discussion. I'll contact you later with the details," I responded, ending the conversation. I had been planning my revenge beforehand, and it had begun. A week later, I suggested to Pablo that we meet in a lawyer's office, a neutral place better than our home. I knew Pablo would surely appeal to emotion. "I'm sorry. I admit I lied about borrowing money from Juana, but I don't want to hurt you anymore. I will repay all the money I borrowed from Juana, so please reconsider the divorce," he said. "Do you really think that's all there is to it?" I also found out about the loan from Juana on the day it happened. And if that was the only reason, why could you immediately give Juana a completed divorce petition? Eh? Then what's the real reason? Could it be my mother is involved? So, it was my mother. At first, I blamed your mother and felt angry. I often thought if only she wasn't here. But in reality, it was different. You were the true cause. I heard that fact, I revealed. That day, I disclosed everything I had heard outside Pablo's room. He could not argue, and it was clear that our bond as a family was dissolving. Trying to calm down, I attempted to drink some tea, but my hands were shaking so much that I couldn't drink properly. "Can you understand that divorce is unavoidable now?" I asked. "Why didn't you say so sooner?" Pablo inquired. His question was valid, as nearly a year had passed since then. I was waiting for the mortgage to be fully paid off. That way, we could proceed with the divorce more smoothly. "Now, what shall we do about the house?" I asked. "What do you mean? What shall we do? We both need a place to live," he replied. When Brenda placed the deed on the table, Pablo let out a surprised gasp. He must have been searching for it without doubt. Even though she thought it unlikely that he would resort to fraud, she didn't want the divorce delayed by any secrets. Therefore, she had quickly returned to the house that day. The majority of this house's mortgage was paid with money I earned, and it's in my name. However, legally, we both have joint rights to it. So I will transfer the house to you, but in return you need to pay me half its value immediately, I stated. That's impossible, he said. It was clear he wouldn't have the funds available, especially not in cash, immediately. If that's impossible, then I'll take the house. I can give you half the money right now, though. How about that? Where is that money coming from? It's an early inheritance from my father. He wanted to ensure that I could live independently after the divorce, I explained. The lawyer detailed the rules for property division at the time of divorce to Pablo and emphasized that an early inheritance was exempt from division. As Pablo looked disheartened, I delivered another blow. And I will be demanding alimony from you. Why? I haven't even had an affair. True, I don't doubt your loyalty to your mother. But alimony isn't only for cases of infidelity. I'm seeking compensation for the significant emotional damage you've caused, I countered. What are you talking about? Pablo seemed momentarily at a loss for words. Worried that any careless remarks might increase the amount of alimony, he stopped speaking midway. However, you can't afford to pay, can you? After all, you've got no more money. Therefore, I will adjust the property division for you. If you're not satisfied, we can settle this in court. Fine, that's acceptable, Pablo reluctantly agreed. But that didn't solve everything. Additionally, I will also deduct the money you borrowed from Juana and her husband. Wait. That's between me and Juana. It has nothing to do with you. Pablo was flustered. Can you really repay it? I pressed him. And he stuttered. Well, I can't really explain it well. I later met with Juana and told her everything. I offered to repay the money Pablo had borrowed under false pretenses to Juana. This is a matter between my father and me, so I'll take the money back. But I need to keep my distance from him for a while, Juana said calmly. It was clear that Pablo had neither the intention nor the means to repay the debt. He prioritized his role as a devoted son to his beloved mother above all else. Do you understand how much Juana is suffering? If you don't return the money right now, Juana will continue to feel guilty towards her husband. Are you prepared for that? With that question, he hung his head. For this reason, I will consider the alimony and the borrowed money as null, and I will take over the house. I'll transfer the funds immediately, so why don't you buy something nice for your mother? But first, you need to find a new place to live. Were you planning to deceive me from the start? How deceitful. Hey, coming from you, who has been deceiving me for 30 years, now that's a statement. Pablo couldn't respond. But I don't want a divorce. I've been too dependent on you. I'll change, so please reconsider. His unwillingness to divorce stemmed from his recent retirement and unemployment. I had been eagerly awaiting the completion of the mortgage payments. He was not competent enough to be rehired, and additionally, he had to care for his increasingly costly mother. How foolish, you should have kept it to yourself rather than telling your mother anything. If you had, I wouldn't have had to hear unpleasant things, and you could have lived peacefully in that house. Your plan turned against yourself. Finally, Pablo accepted his fate and tearfully signed the divorce papers. I believe his tears were not of sadness, but due to facing failure for the first time. However, this was not the extent of my revenge plan. 6 months after the divorce, Pablo found the new house where I had started living and came to visit. I had no intention of returning to that house, as it held only bad memories. Pablo must have searched tirelessly in the countryside to find where I was. I had anticipated his visit because there was still something I needed to tell him. His hair was thinning, and his face was sweaty. The white shirt that once suited him well now clung to his body with sweat and looked unsightly. I couldn't help but laugh, wondering what I had ever found attractive about him. "What are you laughing at?" "I'm in trouble. Help me," he cried out. "By any chance, has your mother developed dementia?" I asked, and he was taken aback. What he replied: she had shown signs of dementia intermittently over the past few years. Either she was determined to act strong in front of her son, or perhaps Pablo idealized her condition and failed to notice it. Anyways, she often behaved strangely in front of me. She would call me Mom and say, "I'll give you this," handing over money, jewelry, and clothes. Having seen similar symptoms in my own grandmother, I recognized it as dementia right away and understood how to handle it. "Thank you, you're a really good girl, Nicole," I said as I patted her head, and she nodded happily like a little girl. Although my mother had secretly put the things my grandmother gave away back, I decided to accept them with gratitude. Having spent so much money over the years, nothing was likely to happen. So the fuss my mother made before about not having money or things was, "That's right. You took money from my purse and payment envelopes too, didn't you?" Ever since the day I learned Pablo's true nature and vowed revenge, I had been watching him closely. It became clear that he was secretly taking money. Until then, I had thought it was Nicole, but it turned out not to be her. That was Mom. Your mother always held pride as the daughter of a wealthy family. She might ask people for things, but she would never stoop to stealing. Pablo looked as if he had swallowed bitter medicine. Although his mother is known to be very self-centered, she retains her pride as a former lady of status. If she wants something, she asks for it outright, but she does not steal or fudge numbers. She also despises debt, and when she learned that the house mortgage was actually a form of debt, she always said, "Let's pay it back soon." When she realized that using credit cards was akin to incurring debt, she stopped using them altogether. When I was newly married, I accidentally overheard a conversation that made it clear Pablo had planned to burden me with the care of his grandmother. She married me so she could take care of my grandmother. Well, the plan eventually fell through when my father died. But I can't agree to give her inheritance just because of caregiving. No, let's take what we can get. When I brought this up, Pablo's face was covered in a different kind of sweat than before. But Mom is out of control. She doesn't even recognize who I am anymore, and she resorts to verbal and physical abuse. Please help me. She being out of control isn't something new. Yes, you were planning to use me as a caregiver. Unfortunately, I only have administrative qualifications in caregiving. Pablo, tracing back through old memories, looked embarrassed. Having said everything, I told Pablo to leave. Actually, I found someone I want to date. It's only been 6 months since our divorce. Were you cheating on me? No, it was just a proposal for a relationship, but he has always supported me. He is a colleague from the same workplace who has always cared for me. He is honest, never lies, and is sincere about his work. So please don't get involved with me anymore. With that, Pablo left with drooping shoulders. For him, it was hard to accept that a woman who was supposed to love him was now interested in another man. It's unlikely he will come back here again. Pablo had bought an apartment to live in with the money from the property division I gave him, and from selling expensive items that his mother had owned. He could have bought the apartment with just the property division, but the amount was reduced due to the alimony paid to me and the payments to Juana. I was surprised that my mother-in-law had allowed that transaction, but it seems that by that time her condition was already deteriorating. Her symptoms of dementia worsened day by day, becoming unmanageable, and she eventually came to me for help. To be precise, she had no one else to turn to. But in the end, she faced another blow from me, and there was no hope of getting any help. Due to her high pride, she refused to consider seeking public assistance. Her strange behaviors received complaints from neighbors, and Pablo, feeling overwhelmed, decided to sell the apartment and use the proceeds to place her in a paid nursing home. Ultimately, it seems he spent his life constantly tormented by money for his mother's sake. The once respected and noble family is now the subject of whispering gossip as they walk down the street. Unable to bear it, Pablo moved to a modest apartment in the neighboring town to live quietly. He has no job, no friends, and his ties with relatives and family have been severed. His mother, whom he once loved deeply, is now in a state where she can no longer even recognize who he is. He is destined to live a life of isolation and poverty, accompanied by many regrets. As for myself, I decided to start a relationship with the person who proposed to me. He is a colleague who has worked his way up to the management at the same company. I was surprised to hear that he had been watching over me for a long time, thinking he had missed out on marriage because he was focused on his career. We are no longer young, so we decided to start sharing time as friends without thinking about marriage. Meanwhile, I received the joyful news that Juana is pregnant with her second child. My granddaughter, Dorothy, is also happy to become a big sister. Juana and her husband offered me the option to live with them, but while I appreciated their kindness, I declined. I also received invitations from my parents to come back home, but I turned those down as well. I have rental income and no financial worries, so I plan to work solely for myself from now on and start a new chapter in my life.